Okay, I know I'm wearing a college hat, I live in a college town, and what else? I probably have student in the title or something. All of this to say, I am so glad I will never be going back to school again for a day in my life because I barely survived college. Being undiagnosed ADHD, still to this day, but I'm pretty sure. So much so that I'm wearing AirPods right now with noise canceling on because every little background noise distracts me and ruins my train of thought. Not the point, case in point. Today, I am going to empathize with my students in the audience here and just highlight the importance of having a great device for your college experience. If it weren't for devices like my MacBook, and in this case, an iPad, I would not have made it through. So in this video, I'm so excited to talk about Apple's most affordable model here, the 11th gen, and why it is such an incredible deal or steal right now, more than it's ever been. This came out earlier this year. It's the improvement upon the 10th gen, which was pretty good, but this is a pretty kick-ass iPad for several reasons. But it got supercharged with, of course, the release of iPadOS 26, which I argue is like revolutionary. It reinvents the iPad. So today I want to talk about how this iPad is an impossibly good deal because it takes the best of both worlds with the Mac and the iPad in one here while also being impossibly affordable, far less than what you'd pay for a higher-end iPad or a MacBook. So without further ado, let's dig in here. Okay, so first up, we got to talk about what you get for the money here. This thing starts out at $349, which I think is an excellent price point. Apple did start selling the 10th gen, which was the last gen version of this that looks a lot like it, for $429. I think they lowered it because they wanted to increase demand. So again, good pricing for what you're getting here, which we'll touch on. You can also get this tablet for even cheaper off of Amazon normally for like $299. You can also get this with education pricing for $299 if you're a student, which, you know, ties into this video theme, I guess. You can also get it for even cheaper on sales weekends like the Prime Day weekend we had in July. I got my grandma one for her birthday for $279, and I'm sure we'll see similar pricing later in the year. So definitely hold out for a sale here or buy it used for even cheaper. The 10th gen is even cheaper as well, but we're talking about the 11th gen here because it brings so much for the money here, especially $279 if you're lucky enough to grab it at that price. First up, you get a really premium design here, identical to the iPad Air 11-inch. That was the precedent set by the 10th gen, which introduced this more updated design, no more home button and legacy features. So it's great. You also get Touch ID in the power button, which is wonderful for unlocking with your finger, as you can imagine. So you get an expansive 11-inch display here, pretty much identical to what you get with the iPad Air, P3 color, no more sRGB that we got with the 10th gen, which just has worse color. You get better color here, better for creative stuff and, you know, watching content on YouTube or whatever streaming service you like. You also have a lot of space to move windows around, multiple windows at that as well. So, you know, it's a good screen real estate size, or you get like a lot of room to work with, so to speak. What else here? You get an excellent camera system. You get a 12 megapixel camera on the back just for basic photos and videos and whatnot, especially of boring stuff like papers. You can do document scanning. You also get an excellent front-facing camera in the landscape orientation here for video calls, which are really common nowadays, you know, post-COVID, I guess, with the center stage capability as well. We also have the iPhone 14 Pro and 15's A16 chip in here, which is plenty powerful to push the iPadOS experience, whether you're running iPadOS 18 or iPadOS 26 later, preferably because of all the features which we'll touch on. So you get plenty of power here, so much so you can run creative apps like Final Cut Pro here and edit 4K video at 120 FPS, for example, slowed down, no problem. So I've had no issues with the power or the horsepower here, so it's plenty powerful for basic tasks, especially anything you're doing as a student as well, which shouldn't be too crazy unless you need that horsepower. Then this video or this tablet isn't for you, but that's another story. And what else here am I forgetting? Okay, I am forgetting something, the USB Type-C port, which I'm going to show in B-roll because I don't feel like picking up the iPad and ruining the focus. Anyway, the point is it's a universal connector for charging if you have a newer iPhone or an Android phone or Windows laptop or a MacBook or whatever you have. It's the standard, it's convenient, and you also get decent enough transfer speeds. USB 2 is kind of disappointing, but it's fast enough to connect to peripherals, a dongle, and some external storage as well, no problem. problem. And speaking of storage, that's the last point I want to make about what you're getting here for $349 or less. If I can get to the part of the website. Not that I need to, but it helps to have a visual. You get 128 gigabytes standard, up from 64 from last year and with previous models. This is fantastic. And this is an interesting thing to say, but I think 96 would have been good enough. That's 64 plus 32. Good at math? Not really. The point is, I literally had to add that with the calculator. Isn't that sad? The point is, you get more than enough storage to just operate. I bring up the 96 figure because I think that would be the bare minimum to be comfortable. But you get double 64, and that's enough to have local files on hand, the operating system, and a bunch of, you know, cloud stuff that you access, which is what you're doing if you're a student or doing basic workflows anyway. Even if you're employed, like, cloud stuff is the standard with Drive or iCloud or whatever. So having, you know, that 64 gigabytes minimum to have the operating system and whatever, plus an extra to have local files, is more than enough in my book. If you get 256, I think you're doing something more intensive, like video editing or whatever, and at that point you should consider getting an even better iPad. But I digress. I think the 128 gigabyte model is the best value here. Anything more is a little more specific if you need to have local files and you don't need the power. But anyway, and all of this to say, I think you get so much for the money here, especially if you snag one of these at a crazy price like $279. You get a fantastic design once again, a display that's expansive and color accurate. You get incredible performance for everyday stuff, USB-C for connectivity, Touch ID, a great camera system, and a usable amount of storage. More than usable once again. Which brings me to my next point, and that is, this is like a good $500 meal deal. And that means you can actually afford to get accessories for it without breaking the bank and upping your overall cost here to like $600, $700, $800, $900 to $1,000, which gets into MacBook range and muddies the water. And I'm sure if you're a student and you're already paying for student loans, this is very important. You want to keep costs down, or if you're a parent and you're helping your kid out, you know, you don't want to spend way too much money, or if you're just a regular person who needs a good productivity device, by all means, don't spend more than you have to. So with the price tag being around, you know, $350 or less, you can afford to get more accessories like the Apple Pencil, which is a crucial accessory here that makes your iPad experience even better. And best of all, because the USB-C pencil you can buy, it's not like specialized in high pressure sensitivity. You can get alternatives like this ESR here, which I'll touch on more, and it works just fine and uses the same, you know, interface and can do all the same stuff like Scribble and whatever. So it really works well, and you don't have to spend an arm and a leg on this. So 30 bucks or 35 bucks here. You can also get a Logitech case, which I totally recommend, the Combo Touch, which has Apple's drivers for the trackpad, unlike a lot of other cases that have a trackpad, meaning that Apple and Logitech kind of monopolize the trackpad situation, which is kind of, but whatever, that's the way it is, meaning that you get the best trackpad experience for iPadOS with the new Windows, which we'll talk about here if I can move them around. But yeah, I would totally get one of these cases, if not the Apple Magic Keyboard Folio here, renewed if you can, for $113. You can get that. It's refurbished. It's probably just used, but it's going to be fine. It's just a keyboard. You know, they probably wipe it off and it's good to go. But the point is, this really enhances your user experience and makes it more like a netbook or a laptop. So if you're sort of choosing between a MacBook and an iPad, this can help you sort of lean in the iPad's direction if you need to save money or you want the iPad experience as well. But yeah, these types of accessories really do enhance your iPad experience, and the best part is you don't have to spend an additional few hundred, you know, on top of a really expensive, you know, price tag of like $500 or $600, just to have that sort of hybrid experience that all of us seem to be so fixated on, especially students, who can really benefit from a situation like this. But before we continue here, I have a brief message from the people that made today's video possible, ESR, and their fantastic accessories for iPad 11th Gen. First up, we have their flip magnetic case, which not only obviously protects your iPad 11th Gen from everyday bumps, drops, and scuffs, but also gives you multiple angles you can use it in for viewing or even creating content, which is great. You can also turn the whole ensemble upright, and the case will support your iPad in portrait mode as well, unlocking even more usage case scenarios involving portrait apps or UI experiences. Either way though, this case keeps your iPad in whatever position you desire with fantastic stability thanks to its magnetic support stand that sort of clicks into place at your desired angle. You get all of this for a very budget-friendly price of $22.99. Oh, and before I forget, it also has a pencil holder portion too, which actually brings us to our next accessory here, the ESR Geo Digital Pencil. As far as I'm concerned, this is an excellent and far more affordable copy of the USB-C Apple Pencil. Not only that, but it's even lighter, comes in 3 great colors, has Find My capability, which is amazing for $30. The $80 USB-C pencil from Apple doesn't even have this. You also, of course, get smooth and precise input with palm rejection, tilt sensitivity, and a 1.5mm replaceable fine tip for detailed writing and drawing. And finally, if you pair it via Bluetooth, you can use its power button to go home with a single click, open the app switcher with a double click, and get real-time battery display in the Find My app as well. And last up, they sent over one of their Ultra Fit Classic screen protectors, which was super simple to put on with their dust-free 2-step application with an included frame apparatus. All in all here, you get 3 super practical and I'd argue necessary accessories to complete your budget iPad 11th Gen experience. I'll leave a link down below if you're interested in checking any of these accessories out. But anyway, back to the video here. Next up, I want to talk about how iPadOS 26 completely transforms this already incredible value iPad, which, you know, in the past was only so capable, but now it's even more capable thanks to a few key features. The first being the new windowing mode, which is, I think, the biggest deal here. This is something we've been begging Apple for, and I'm so happy that they brought it to this iPad and didn't just keep it an iPad Pro and iPad Air specific feature like Stage Manager was, which didn't even work as well. Like the windows moved around all herky-jerky, same with the resizement here. It's super smooth and it works perfectly with the A16 chip. No stutter, no lag, it's just so gorgeous. You can also use the new nav buttons here, the stoplight buttons, whatever you want to call them. They're Mac-like, but with an iPad twist. So you can minimize stuff to close stuff. You can also use the green button here to expand into full screen, and of course pull that corner here to resize and, you know, bring the window back out to be moved around. What else? We also have an X to close the app, which I'm not going to do here. The green toggle here also brings you to a Mac-like menu where you can move and resize and also fill in arrange windows here. So for example, I can move a window left or right here and also rearrange the windows here into a sort of pattern. So I can do a split view here where you can, you know, of course, slide back and forth to resize the window. I can also do a triple view, which is quite nice. That takes advantage of the landscape orientation here. I can also do a quad view, which I quite like as well. There's a little bit of overlap, but it works really well here, and I think the 11-inch display accommodates this really well here, but of course we can get out of that as well by just sort of getting the windows back into the free floating mode. But yeah, this really changes the game here, and I'm so happy that this experience is again on an iPad 11th Gen or a base iPad for that matter with a base chip, like a really simple chip. They made this happen, and I'm just, again, I'm shocked that this model has this. This is the big reason I think why this tablet is such a great value, because you get Mac-like functionality here and more, which we'll talk about, but the windowing is just so important, and of course you can just swipe up and go back into regular iPad mode. But I'm so glad that we're not just sort of relegated or only allowed to have this experience here. We're allowed to have both. Again, or in other words, I'm just glad that this amazing feature is not just an iPad Pro or Air only feature, and gives you even more of a reason to buy one of these, because, you know, you get this experience here even at, you know, $279 in some cases. And before I forget, you can flick windows back and forth, which is so cool. Such a great way to intuitively, you know, tile your windows or do split screen. And of course you can resize again. And once again, you can use the green button here to do the same thing, but the flicking is just so much more fun. Again, though, I am just so in love with the way windowing works. It makes so much sense, and it just works so well, especially with these later betas, specifically the public beta, which I totally recommend you download the minute you get one of these. It's very stable, but of course the final version will be even more stable. But yeah, it's just gotten smoother and better, and it just works so well once again. It brings Mac-like functionality to your iPad while retaining that iPad experience, which is important, especially if you're using your finger or pencil or whatever. But the best part is you're not paying a Mac price for this. So again, if you were sort of torn between a MacBook and whatever and an iPad, the gap is definitely closer than it's ever been. which brings me to my next point here, the Files app. We got some new features going on in here. I wouldn't say anything super crazy, but you know, the UI just makes more sense. Obviously, the windowing makes it an even better experience here, but there are a few tweaks that make it, again, even better. First up, we have a enhanced list view here with the ability to just see more about your files here in this sort of linear view. You can also close these, but yeah, you get more control and just view over what's going on, and also you can sort of expand here. Speaking of these folders, they're now colorful if you want them to be. You can also add emojis, which I think is super helpful, you know, just for navigating a lot of folders and files without seeing a sea of blue folders, which I don't think is mentally stimulating at all. So I like memorizing colors and stuff, and that just helps me focus a little better. So I really enjoy that here. What else? Okay, this is one of my favorite, like, underrated features. You can add folders to the dock by holding down on them, going to add to, and then pushing dock. I already have something saved in the dock here, so we can go to notes. I can push it, it fans out, and I can, for example, drag a screenshot from here into the notes app, just like that, no problem. It duplicated for a second there, probably just a beta glitch. But yeah, that's super convenient if you are working with a lot of files, if you're dragging photos into presentations or documents or whatever you're doing. I love that feature, and you don't even have to open up the Files app to do that. So again, you know, we have some basic stuff here. I know there's other stuff that I'm not mentioning, under the hood stuff, you know, with Apple Intelligence and external storage and whatever else, but I think that the interface here with the new buttons and liquid glass and just the ability to resize and, you know, have it as a window and also have stuff in the dock, these little things really make a difference here. So again, if you're sort of weighing your options between a MacBook and an iPad, again, the gap is getting even closer because, you know, before with previous versions of iPadOS, it wasn't even close. Finder was just so much better. Finder is still better in a lot of ways. I would say it's different. You know, the Mac is just, you know, more specialized in certain ways. So if you need one, buy one. But again, for basic file management, again, the gap is getting closer, and I love to see that, especially for people who want to use the iPad as their all-in-one device, especially if you're in college and this is what you want, this is what you can afford, and you want to prioritize, you know, the pencil experience as well with Mac-like features that have been implemented. And again, speaking of Mac-like features, last but certainly not least, we're going to discuss the menu bar, which is one of the biggest new additions to iPadOS 26 on top of the windowing. I think it's a close second, if not equal to windowing, because you get so much functionality you didn't get before that otherwise would have had to have been in UI or whatever here, which is really important if you want to keep the iPad experience intuitive and you want to retain screen real estate. You know, 11 inches isn't the biggest screen, so you want to sort of, again, have more space to view your content without buttons and things and whatever. You also want your experience to be intuitive. What if you don't know where a function is? Well, now you know, because you can go up to the menu bar and find it, which is especially helpful in word processing and on the web and, you know, in files and like whatever. So, you know, I really enjoy that. It works even better with the pencil and a cursor, of course, because this is more of a laptop-like feature, but it works well with your finger as well, and it works well in either portrait and landscape modes. So I am a huge fan of this. Again, it allows you to just access so much more functions within your given app here, whether it's a creative app, which, you know, there's nothing to show here with Final Cut Pro, but you can imagine this is a really big deal for people who are doing more advanced workflows that have a lot of different pieces and functions that you need to access here where there's limited screen space already. They have to simplify the UI, so this is going to benefit people who, again, use apps like this. But in terms of just basic everyday functionality, it works well in word processors and, again, browsing the web and whatever else you're doing, particularly, I'm sure, Microsoft apps, and I'm sure they'll add features to any school-related apps like Canvas and whatever. So again, this is just so huge in terms of adding functionality, in terms of making the experience more intuitive, user-friendly, and just simplifying UI. I think that's one of Apple's goals, and although they didn't want to implement this up front because they wanted to make this such a great touch-based device, that's the whole point of iPad. Now that I think developers have perfected it, and now that we understand what the iPad is, this is all Craig Federighi, by the way, I'm not just saying this. I watched his, or read his interview with Federico Viticci. I'll leave a link to that article down below, it's fantastic. Again though, since the iPad is such a well-established device and multi-touch has been around for so long, now Apple feels comfortable bringing this in here. Again, in a really iPad way, you know, like sort of out of the way when you don't need it, but there if you want it. And I absolutely love it. It works even better again with the pencil and like a folio trackpad situation. So you really, again, get the best of both worlds here with the iPad 11th gen for really nothing. You're paying so little for so much here. Again, this expansive display, a powerful enough processor, and all of this capability with this update, which of course comes free with the device. Obviously, imagine if you had to pay for the updates like you used to back in the day. But yeah, I am so impressed with what this iPad does while retaining that core iPad experience. And of course, you know, just like we've talked about in the past, or in other videos, if I can find this app here amidst all the windows here. I'm thinking Pages is Notability. Where is Notability? Here it is. You know, this iPad still does iPad stuff well, like video watching and note taking and whatever. Like, it's still the iPad you know and love, but with this sort of quasi, sort of kind of, you know, hybrid mode that actually works quite well. And I'm sure, you know, it'll get better with future updates like iPadOS 27 and 28. And again, the fact that it runs so well on a base chip like the A16 makes my heart so happy that everybody gets these new features here. Maybe not external monitor support, which is an iPad Air and iPad Pro feature, so definitely keep that in mind. But if you're just working off the iPad and you want to buy accessories and not break the bank, it's just such a steal. It's almost too good to be true, especially if it's on sale. So pick one of these up. You got nothing to lose if you're new to the Apple ecosystem. This is a great place to start. This OS is just unbelievable, and it just brings so much new functionality to already incredible hardware for what you're paying for here. You know, $279 to $349 for all of this. Great display, great design, decent performance, everything you could need for basic tasks and productivity, especially if you are a student. Once again, you want to handwrite and whatever, but also, you know, go into files and have multiple windows open. And if you want to take advantage of accessories without paying upwards of $1,000, I digress. Thanks for watching this video. Again, check out my links to ESR down below, and good luck with your school year. I'm so glad I never have to do homework again. My brain hurts enough from just doing this job and sitting here and staying on task. Honestly, pro tip, I started using these today, like AirPods Pro with noise cancellation. It has kept me so much more locked in, and I'm not hearing like city noise and my fridge going and stuff. Like, that's how on the spectrum I am. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this here. Stay tuned for more. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.